And now, Major General Nathanael Greene by George Washington Greene. Nathanael Greene was born on the 6th of June, 1742, at Potawatomi, in the town of Warwick, Rhode Island. His father was a farmer, a miller, an anchorsmith, and a Quaker preacher. His first years were passed on the farm, in the mill, and at the forge. His first textbooks were the Bible and Barclay's Apology. A chance acquaintance, formed in a ramble over the fields, first awoke his desire for knowledge methodized. A visit to Newport to buy a book threw him, by another chance, into the company of Ezra Stiles, then chief of American scholars, who taught him what books to buy. His first taste of science was in the rigorous demonstrations of Euclid, which he studied by the corn hopper as it shook down the golden grain, or by the forge while the iron was heating under the blast of the huge bellows. At the same time, he did his daily tasks so well, performed his filial duties so cheerfully, that his father, casting his prejudices behind him, gave him a Latin master. The memory of those who first stimulated the curiosity and shaped the thoughts of youth should not be forgotten. Greene's teacher was a well-trained Scotchman of the name of Maxwell. Shall I say that it was chance also which brought this good scholar to the little village of East Greenwich, just as a new genius was entering upon the struggles of life? From Maxwell, Greene learned to love the Latin poets, and took special delight in Horace. Locke also, whom the progress of intellectual and political science in our days has left somewhat in the background, but who is the chosen guide of our fathers, became the companion of his pillow. His father had a lawsuit, and the future general bought Blackstone's commentaries and Jacob's Law Dictionary and made himself master of their contents in order to follow up the case more intelligently. Butler's analogy confirmed his taste for profound reasoning, and Swift's vigorous English awakened his sense of style. To form his own style, he engaged in a correspondence with Samuel Ward, his junior by many years, but who was enjoying the advantages of a liberal education in the young Rhode Island college. He got his Greek and Roman history from Plutarch and Rollin, his English from Hume and Rapin. Hume's essays he read with deep interest, and carefully meditated the generalizations of Ferguson's civil society. A local reputation was the natural fruit of such a youth, and on his removal to Coventry, where a branch of the ironworks had been established, he was chosen to represent the town in the General Assembly. His first act of citizenship was to set measures on foot for the establishment of a school. Thus, Lexington found him with a mind trained to observation and thought, a body hardened by the sports and labors of country life, and a character formed by an attentive study of books and men. He was early to see that the dispute between England and her colonies must sooner or later be decided by the sword, and set himself to prepare for his part in it by the study of military history and of works on the art of war. He was among the first to perceive that the strength of the colonies lay in their union, and that to succeed they must rise above local prejudices and learn to look upon the 13 parts as an undivided and indivisible whole. For my own part, he wrote to Governor Ward on the 16th of October, 1775, I would as soon go to Virginia as stay here. I can assure the gentlemen to the southward that there could not be anything more abhorrent proposed than a union of those, the northern colonies, for the purpose of conquering the southern colonies. When the moment for action came, he threw off his Quaker garb and took a leading part in the formation of an independent company still known in Rhode Island as the Kentish Guards. The severe discipline of the siege of Boston followed, in which he won for life the confidence and affection of Washington. In the movements around New York, he took an active part, though for a portion of the time ill with fever. Trenton and Princeton came next, a brilliant surprise and a bold change of base, which foiled the well-directed efforts of the enemy, and won secure winter quarters for our weary men, in all the glories of which he largely shared. It was in the dark hours of that decisive winter that Greene first crossed the threshold of Independence Hall. For communing with him in unrestrained confidence, Washington had laid his heart bare before him, telling him what he foresaw, what he feared, what he needed, and saying, "Go and tell these things to the Congress, for you know them all, and I dare not trust them to paper." The echoes of the Declaration were still lingering around these walls when Greene first entered their hallowed precincts. There sat John Hancock, who first put his name to the consecrated roll as president. graceful, dignified, fully conscious of the weight which high bearing gives to high position. At the table by his side was Charles Thompson, with long white hair and flashing cavernous eyes, a schoolmaster once, but now hazarding a princely fortune when he signs his name as secretary. And there they all sat in anxious consultation and bent their inquiring eyes on the ambassador of Washington. And from time to time, as the war dragged slowly on, revealing new dangers and calling for new sacrifices, Greene returned to that shrine of freedom to take counsel with Congress in the name of his beloved leader. You remember the Brandywine where, by a march of 4 miles in 45 minutes, he threw himself between the routed right wing of the Americans and the exultant British, checked their advance, and saved the artillery. You remember Germantown, where he again covered the retreat and brought off his troops in safety. You remember Monmouth, and how gallantly he bore himself on that bloody day, the day on which the American soldier first united discipline with valor. You remember Springfield, where he commanded alone, and by his judicious choice of positions and obstinate resistance held the veteran Knyphausen at bay. I will not dwell upon the creative energy which gave in his hands such efficiency to the quartermaster general's department, nor pause to remind you that by his acceptance of the hated burthen at a most critical period of the war, he sacrificed his military ambition to his sense of duty and his love for Washington. But I cannot refrain from reading to you a letter of Washington which covers the whole ground. As you are retiring from the office of Quartermaster General, and have requested my sense of your conduct and services while you acted in it, I shall give it to you with the greatest cheerfulness and pleasure. You have conducted the various duties of it with capacity and diligence, entirely to my satisfaction, and, as far as I have had an opportunity of knowing, with the strictest integrity. When you were prevailed on to undertake the office in March 1778, it was in great disorder and confusion, and by extraordinary exertions you so arranged it as to enable the army to take the field the moment it was necessary and to move with rapidity after the enemy when they left Philadelphia. From that period to the present time, your exertions have been equally great. They have appeared to me to be the result of system, and to have been well calculated to promote the honor and interest of your country. In fine, I cannot but add that the states have had in you, in my opinion, an able, upright, and diligent servant. I now turn to the South, and to that marvelous campaign in which, and here I but borrow the words of Robert Morris, Superintendent of Finance, he found in his own genius ample compensation for the want of men, money, clothes, arms, and supplies. England, unable to subdue her colonies by the north, turned her arms against the south. Savannah fell, an easy conquest. Lincoln held out 30 days in Charleston against the combined forces of Clinton and Arbuthnot, but was compelled to capitulate. The victorious English spread like a torrent over the Carolinas and Georgia. Gates, with the fresh laurels of Saratoga on his brow, was sent to hold them in check, but was crushed at Camden. Whom shall we send now? Was the anxious question. The country and the army answered, Greene. I think I am sending you a general, wrote Washington to a Southern friend. But what can a general do without men, without arms, without clothing, without stores, without provisions? And following the same train of thought, he wrote to Governor Lee of Maryland, the entire confidence I have in the abilities, fortitude, and integrity of General Greene, founded on a long and intimate experience of them, assures me that he will do everything his means will enable him to do, and I doubt not that candid allowances will be made for the peculiar difficulties he has to encounter. I recommend him to your state as worthy of its utmost confidence and support, and to your excellency in particular as one whom I rank among the number of my friends. Greene hastened to put himself at the head of his army. If a body of 2,307 men, only 800 of whom were present and fully fit for duty, could be called an army. Gates had resolved to go into winter quarters, but Greene, who felt that he must first of all awaken the moral sense of his officers and men, ordered a forward movement and pitched his camp at Cheraw on the banks of the PD, just within the borders of South Carolina. Here he could organize his forces, tighten the reins of discipline, and establish relations with the governors of the states on which he depended for reinforcements and supplies. This he called his camp of repos. Short, however, was the repos for Cornwallis England's best general, was advancing with an army. Superior in numbers, perfect in equipment and discipline, and flushed with recent victory. Without moving his main body, the American general threw out a detachment under Morgan to alarm his adversary for his left flank. This brought on the brilliant victory of the Cowpens and the masterly retreat of the American army across the Dan, which lured the British general from his base and won for the Americans the chief fruits of victory. 10 days of skillful maneuvering prepared the way for the hard-fought field of Guilford Courthouse. Cornwallis, though master of the ground, shrank from a new trial of strength with his persistent adversary and fell back with his shattered forces in swift retreat upon Wilmington. All the plans of the Englishman had been thwarted. All that the American had attempted, he had done. Then arose the difficult question: should he pursue Cornwallis into Virginia, or, borrowing a lesson from Roman history, strike at his posts in South Carolina? Remote from reinforcements, he wrote to Washington on the 29th of March, 15 days after the Battle of Guilford, inferior to the enemy in numbers and no prospect of support. I am determined to carry the war immediately into South Carolina. The enemy will be obliged to follow us or give up their posts in that state. If the former takes place, it will draw the war out of this state and give it an opportunity to raise its proportion of men. If they leave their posts to fall, they will lose more than they can gain here. If we continue in this state, the enemy will hold their possessions in both. All things considered, I think the movement is warranted by the soundest reasons, both political and military. The maneuvers will be critical and dangerous, and the troops exposed to every hardship. But as I share it with them, I hope they will bear up against it with that magnanimity which has already supported them and for which they deserve everything of their country. On the 6th of April, the adventurous march began. On the 20th, he sat down before Camden. A check at Hobkirk's Hill was followed, like the defeat at Guilford, by the retreat of the enemy. For it must be remembered that though he lost battles, he won campaigns. Post after post, Fort Watson, Camden, Fort Mott, Fort Granby, Augusta, with its 3 forts, fell in rapid succession, and on the 22nd of May he laid siege to 96. Another momentary check was also followed by the fruits of victory, and in the middle of July he paused in his marchings and countermarchings to give his weary men a short breathing space on the high hills of Santee. One more bloody battle and one more bold advance drove the enemy from all the remaining strongholds in the interior, and by the end of November the city of Charleston, a few sea islands, and a narrow strip of coast were all that was left to England of her conquest of the Carolinas. With the peace of 1783, Greene's public life ended. On the 19th of June, 1786, he died, too soon to take the part that belonged to him in the civil history of his country, and display what Hamilton has designated the enormous powers of his mind. He died, too, in the darkest hours of the Confederation, leaving the country to whose service he had consecrated himself, still doubtful whether her hard-won independence would prove a blessing or a curse. General Greene wrote Washington to Rochambeau in July, lately died at Savannah in Georgia. The public, as well as his family and friends, has met with a severe loss. He was a great and good man indeed. General Greene's death, he wrote to Lafayette almost a year later, is an event which has given such general concern and is so much regretted by his numerous friends that I can scarce persuade myself to touch upon it, even so far as to say that in him you have lost a man who affectionately regarded and was a sincere admirer of you. As the political horizon grew darker and he was looking around him for a strong arm to lean upon, his thoughts went back to the truthfulness and devotion of Greene, and he wrote to Knox, "In regretting, as I have often done, the death of our much-lamented friend General Greene, I have accompanied it of late with a query whether he would not have preferred such an exit to the scene which it is more than probable many of his compatriots may live to bemoan." The highest honors were paid to Greene's memory everywhere. The Society of the Cincinnati, by a special resolution, admitted his eldest son to the order at the age of 18, and solemnized his obsequies by public observances in which Hamilton pronounced the funeral oration. Congress voted him a monument at the seat of government. For 90 years, this resolve lay forgotten in the constantly accumulating mass of congressional documents, till a senator from Rhode Island, Henry Bowen Anthony, allied to Greene by blood, and mindful of what great nations owe to their great men, demanded its fulfillment, and before 2 more years shall have run their course, an equestrian statue from the skillful hand of that eminent American sculptor Henry Kirk Brown shall take its place in the goodly company of America's great men, conspicuous amid the adornments of the national capital, and recall to grateful remembrance the patriotism, the wisdom, the valor, the civil and military genius of Nathaniel Greene.